Welcome to Liminal Space, where we explore the thresholds of identity, culture, and experience. I'm Matt Liu, one half of the hosting duo. Along with my friend Susan, we've created this podcast for those who find themselves navigating the spaces in between, whether it's between cultures, worlds, or ideas. Each episode, we delve into the rich complexity of modern Chinese stories as told by those who exist at its peripheries, diaspora voices, third culture kids, and individuals who embody the bridge between China and the world and between tradition and innovation. Step into liminal space with us, where we find meaning in the transitions, the gray areas, and the moments of becoming.
Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Travis, otherwise known as Haima, a mixed Japanese-Canadian who set off from Vancouver at the ripe age of 21 to be adopted by a mixed family in Shenzhen. From there, his China journey moved on to Beijing, then back to Canada, before being sent off to represent and grow Lululemon in Shanghai. We have so many questions, and it's great to have you on, Travis.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you, Matt.
Welcome.
Hi. Great to be here with you both.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's so exciting to finally have you on. And before we go into your background and what brought you here, why don't we start with a one sentence on to our audience on who you are and what you're currently working on.
Awesome. Thank you. You summed it up pretty well there, Susan. So my name is Travis. Japanese name is Takeshi Tsuchiya, and I'm more commonly known here as Haima, which is my Japanese or Chinese name, sorry. And for those of you that do speak Mandarin, it means exactly what you think it does. It's literally seahorse, not a translation of my English name or Japanese name for that matter. It's a bit of a long story, but that's how I'm known here. And I've been working in Shanghai for the past 2 years with Lululemon, a company that's, I guess, getting better known from my hometown of Vancouver, BC. And it's been a great journey so far. So happy to sit with you here today and chat about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Travis. So yeah, tell us about growing up in Vancouver, where you consider your hometown. And specifically, how did kind of the two sides of your culture affect your upbringing? Because you have quite a different background from a lot of our guests, and we are always interested in what another type of bicultural experience can feel like as a kid.
Okay. As far back as I can remember, my Japanese heritage was always just a part of life and day to day. Growing up in Vancouver, there still is a very large Asian community from all parts of Asia as well. So for me, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was just kind of it's very normal. I would say I spent a lot of time with my cousins on the Japanese side of my family. So when we were kids, we were always kind of in touch with that side, whether it was interacting with parts of Japanese media, famous Studio Ghibli movies, or eating rice with every meal, making sushi, things of that nature. So I didn't really think too much of it. It was just kind of something that was a part of me. But I would say that in those days, it was less common, or I guess the Asian community wasn't quite as large as it is now. So I was in that kind of zone where I was maybe the Asian kid with my other just friends. And then when I kind of got to high school and started meeting other friends and kind of identifying more with the Asian side of me, I was kind of the quote unquote white friend, or the non-Asian one. So you kind of bounce between the two. And for me, I think that was compounded by the fact that I don't speak Japanese. So I grew up not really speaking it at all, just a little bit maybe with my grandparents or bachin and jichin on my Japanese side. But my cousins and I, there's quite a few of us, we never really learned to speak very fluently at all. Maybe just using words kind of to make jokes amongst us, and you kind of learn a few things here and there, but that was never a big thing for us. That was mostly just every other parts of the culture.
Yeah. That's interesting. And also, I think another point that I remember from our initial conversation that you mentioned was how your ancestors from Japan on both sides of your family came to Canada in very different circumstances. And
Yes.
that also played a part in terms of where they settled and how you grew
Yeah.
up. So I was wondering if you could just fill us in a little bit about those kind of interesting contrasts.
Yeah, definitely. So good question, Matt. So to trace it back a little bit, I guess you could say I am third generation Japanese Canadian. So if you want to go 23andMe, I am officially 49% Japanese, 1% Okinawan, all from my mom's side. And then my
Okay.
mom's parents, they're both full Japanese. My mom's dad was born in Canada as a first generation Japanese Canadian, I guess. That would have been a little bit pre-World War II, but in Vancouver, his family, they had moved shortly before that to Vancouver. There was at the time a little bit of, an exodus from Japan. People were immigrating to other parts of the world. And then my mom's mom was also born in Vancouver as well. So they didn't, like, family's not connected. It was just, they're just part of the Japanese diaspora at the time. And the story goes basically around in the early, I guess, 1940s or a little bit before, when World War II was breaking out. The situation in North America is obviously getting a little complicated.
Right.
But my mom's mother, so I'll just call her Bachin, just Japanese for grandma. Her family, they decided to leave and move back to Japan before anything kind of got too out of hand, I guess. I'm not entirely sure of the dates, but anyhow, she ended up growing up back in Japan after being born in Canada. So spent the majority of her childhood there in wartime Japan, which was quite interesting to hear about as I was older. And then on my mom's dad's side, so Jichin, his family stayed in Vancouver. But what ended up happening was, as soon as, I guess, the US declared war on Japan, Canada obviously being a very close ally, was kind of thrown into the mix with that. So what ended up happening to the community, the Japanese community in Vancouver at the time, was they were moved to the internment camps, which were going to be kind of in northern BC. So just this untamed wilderness, which if you've ever been to the Pacific Northwest, whether that's in the US, Portland, Seattle, you'll know it's quite a rugged terrain, very beautiful landscapes, but not the kind of place you would expect to see a full Japanese community, especially in those days.
Right.
So how it ended up happening was my mom's dad, so Jichin, his family, they were basically kind of rounded up, and I think they were given something like an hour to collect as many things as they could to put into kind of just like a standard cardboard box, and the rest of the possessions were being, I guess, confiscated, or they're staying in Vancouver. So at this point, it was him, his family. He was the youngest of a few siblings, and his parents. So they were quickly kind of rushed off and moved up into the north of BC to a city, or I guess a town known as Slocan in those days. And then he basically just grew up in the wilderness there with his family and other Japanese families that grew up or that were in BC at the time. And they just kind of formed a Japanese community there in the middle of BC. So,
yeah.
I mean, when I asked him about that, or when he would talk about it, like, he was so young that you don't really know anything else. It's just kind of, just grew up in that setting, speaking Japanese and kind of keeping the traditions, playing baseball. And, it was a pretty normal upbringing, all things considered, just under those circumstances. So then how things kind of eventually got back to, where my mom comes into the story was after the war. My mom's mother, so Bachin, and her family decided to come back to Canada, Vancouver, to try and reunite with her father, since he wasn't able to go back with them to Japan at the time of the outbreak of the war. So they were separated. And of course, no cell phones or communication at that time. So you're just sort of spending all these years kind of wondering, where somebody is. So, eventually trying to get reunited. So that's what led them back. However, there was some laws in place that prevented Japanese people from settling in Vancouver, Lower Mainland proper for, I forget the precise amount of time, X number of years post-war. So they were pretty much landed and then kind of rushed back up into the north where the communities were, the internment camps. And then, I guess, long story short, my Bachin and Jichin down the line, they ended up meeting in these communities, and the rest is history. And then how it goes from there was they ended up having, my mom, and she has 4 siblings. They were all born in another small town in northern BC called Golden, which is now known for, skiing and things of that nature. But essentially they were all raised up there in kind of the small northern BC town. And then eventually made the move back down to the Lower Mainland Vancouver area in about the mid to late 70s, I think, which is when things kind of had changed and Japanese people were starting to make their way back into Vancouver at that time. So that was kind of the long story. And I didn't know any of that until I was in high school, actually. I did a project on World War II and how it affected your family. So I remember sitting down and asking them about their experience. And that was the first time I really kind of got to hear in depth from both their sides. So it was interesting just to kind of have a little glimpse into kind of what those times were like and, what they kind of went through. And one add-on story was my Bachin. So growing up in Japan during those times, I remember she shared one point of when she was in school, and they would have the military officials would come in and kind of give briefs on the war effort, if you will. And her impression was that Japan was never in any sort of unfavorable position, if you will. It was always kind of they were going to come out
a sure
okay.
bet.
So as far as she was concerned, she was it was just kind of we were just kids.
Just another day of dominating the world. Yeah.
Pretty much. Until you're not.
Yeah, wow. No, that's wild, especially coming back to be corralled somewhere new after
Yeah.
like not having like reunited with your family for so long. Like, do you know how long they were gone for when the war
Oh,
happened?
gosh, at least 10 years, maybe something around that. It was enough to kind of grow up and spend because when my mom's or my bachelor's family decided to come back to Canada, I don't know if they tried immediately right after the war, but it did take some time since it was kind of contemplating, do we just stay here or make their way back? And eventually they
Mm-hmm.
decided to go as a family. So, when I was young growing up, like all of my like Bachin and Jichin, their kind of siblings as well were all around. So I was sort of like, oh, this is just like kind of normal. I didn't have too many relatives in Japan at that time. And
Mm-hmm.
I even have a few still that are in these northern towns in BC. But I'll link this a little bit to just the lack of speaking Japanese growing up. So even like my mom and her siblings, like they didn't really learn at all as well, even though
Okay.
their parents were both fluent and speaking that as like, their first language growing up. And that was just partly due to raising the family, in Canada after the war. It was kind of more about just getting into Canadian society and,
Sure.
having
Yeah.
a good English accent versus
Mm-hmm.
anything that was too reminiscent of, I guess, wartime at that point. So
Right.
that was kind of the explanation I was given. And then when it came down to my cousins and my siblings and our generation, it was kind of becoming less and less common until, other people or my cousins took interest in it on their own kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of how that all developed.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting, man. Thanks for sharing that. It's a part of history, I guess, that like a lot of people don't really come into contact with and certainly never think about. I guess without your high school history project, maybe you wouldn't know as much about it.
There's a chance like that really kind of was the thing that sort of forced me to look into that a bit more and kind of discover that. Cause otherwise I was
Yeah,
just sort of like, yeah, I'm just who I am and that's just a part of me. But I didn't really think too much about it beyond
yeah,
that as far as it being anything different, honestly.
hmm yeah.
Mhm.
And for sure, I totally identify with that. I don't think I had much interest really in my Chinese culture either growing up until maybe like towards the end of high school and most and in college. Because yeah, we want to just view ourselves as just the same as everyone else, right? You don't
Or
want
just
people to
assimilate.
treat us differently
Yeah.
or whatever. So yeah. So
Mhm.
was this project kind of like the initial kind of a turning point for you to start kind of exploring like your own roots and your ties with like Japan and Asia and that part of your identity?
Yeah, a good question, man. I think so because you kind of just reminded me too. Like growing up, like I always knew I was half like Japanese, if you will, and there was certain things that I did that were different. I actually remember the first day I was like in elementary school when another kid said that I was Asian. I never thought of that in my life. I always just considered myself to be like Canadian. I
Right,
grew up doing
exactly.
everything. Like I just like I was grew up playing hockey, and I was like, I just thought I was like a regular kid, but until another person kind of pointed out, I was like, "What do you mean?" I remember coming home thinking about it, being like, "Huh?" Like kind of questioning. I was young though. I can't remember. Probably grade one
Mom
or
and
two,
dad, they're
but
calling me
No.
Asian.
I was
No,
like,
it's like
"Huh?"
it's like you
I
don't you
was like,
don't realize you're like the other quote unquote until
"Yeah."
someone points it
Yeah.
out and you're suddenly like, oh, like
No,
I think a lot
Travis,
of
you're
us.
just tan.
That's what I thought. I just like to just get in the sun. But yeah, huh. Interesting times. But yeah, I think after so I did that project and I think yeah, after that I was definitely a little bit more curious as far as my own family's story, just knowing that I'd grown up with a lot of relatives
Hmm.
that all shared that experience, I guess, and kind of being a bit more curious as to what those times were like and kind of getting to know a bit more about the bigger picture as well. So
Yeah.
even in the Vancouver area now, there's still a decent Japanese population. And if you were to meet anybody kind of like myself, second, third Japanese Canadian or generation Japanese Canadian, they're probably
Hmm.
gonna have a similar story family wise. To give you context, so I remember I was 16 and my mom she wanted me to try out for this hockey team. This is a bit of a tangent, but it was comprised of Japanese Canadians, and we were going to Japan to play against Japanese high school teams. So kind of a bit of an exchange project. I don't know how my mom found out about this, but it was basically
Pretty niche.
kids. It was pretty niche, yeah. Kids 16 to 18 in the provinces of BC and Alberta were like the highest Japanese concentration of people are. Anyway, so I had no idea what to expect, but I remember going out and playing for this team, and I was like, we are all sort of very similar, like situations, whether it was half, quarter, or some guys were still like full Japanese, but growing up completely in Canada, there was one kid on the team that could actually speak Japanese, where I think his parents had recently moved. But other than that, we were all very much in a same kind of, we had a maybe similar family history, if you will. So I remember on that trip, the 2 weeks when we were kind of going around Japan playing and, just getting to know these other guys, I was like, damn, this is cool. Like I didn't grow up with any of them. I played against a lot of them growing up, but I was cool to finally meet a lot of these guys and kind of get to know them a bit and also see how similar like our kind of stories and family upbringings were. And I was like, hey, did you also have a guy tell you that you were Asian when you were like really young? Like did that also happen to you?
It was very disorienting.
Yeah, I was like, that really threw me off. So that was a really cool experience, and I was glad I got to share that with my mom. And thankfully, I made the team. That was the other thing.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think those camps are quite common among just like the diaspora communities. Like I've definitely gone to like a few of those for like Chinese kids, and it was cool. Like growing up, I went to like school with very few Chinese kids, and suddenly it's like you're all together and you all have you all sang that same Tonghua song at karaoke, and some of those like that shared experiences of the Asian parents or whatever. So it's like a nice like solidarity thing. And there were also those like root seeking camps. Like you go back and you visit all these famous places, and like this is China. I'm like, cool. So
yeah,
but
get some Confucius magnets. Yeah.
Anyways, so back to like you, Travis, and like growing up in this kind of environment. So I'm kind of curious what sparked your interest in China initially, because you're East Asian, but you're not Chinese. There's a lot of like points of contention, and especially I guess with the history between many of the East Asian countries. What stood out to you? And like I guess we can roll into like kind of your college years too, and like what was different for you?
Well, I was no different. I should start with that. I honestly, growing up, Vancouver at the time also, there was a really large Chinese population when I was growing up. So I should say I was always kind of aware of Chinese culture. And I had Chinese friends, or people I considered to have Chinese friends. I later found out they were all from Hong Kong when I got older. That really rocked. Anyways, when I was young, that was sort of, I think, similar to when a lot of Japanese came to Canada. That actually predated a lot. But a lot of Chinese people that came over were all coming from, Guangdong, Hong Kong area when I was growing up. So that was kind of the main, I guess, exposure point. But I will say, like, my impression of China was never that, like, overly positive. Partially coming from maybe the Japanese side of my family, where I was just always assumed that Japan was like the greatest country in Asia, or it was sort of the model country. I knew nothing else, like nothing about other like East Asian countries really. All I knew was like what Japan had and what the culture was like, and that was enough to be like the pearl, if you will. But what's kind of sparked my interest, so I was never really like keen on visiting China, maybe one day for the Great Wall. I never really wanted to learn Mandarin. That seemed really hard. It was kind of really just by accident, if I'm being completely honest. And how this kind of came out was when I was about 21 or so. And I was looking to do kind of a longer travel-esque experience. And I was thinking of doing something that was called like an au pair, which I had a few friends from like post-secondary and even high school that had done that in English-speaking countries like Australia and the UK. And the gist is like you're kind of like a younger person, so in your early 20s probably, and you kind of find like a homestay family that probably has young kids, and you're sort of like an in-house nanny caretaker, if you will. That was sort of the gist. And I talked to two friends of mine that had done that in Australia, and their experience matched what I kind of thought it was like. And they took care of the kids and lived with this family, and then on the other side of it, you're exploring a country and you kind of get this experience. And for me, I had done a little bit of, backpacking and things as you do in your early 20s and starting to, wanting to see the world more. And I'd also had a part-time job all the way through like high school working with kids and, with like sport camps and things. So I was like, this seems kind of natural. Like just put these two things together and I'll be able to access my goal of experiencing life in another country. So initially I wanted to go abroad to like an English speaking country as well. And the one thing I happened to overlook in my young age was that the amount of families that are looking to invite a young 20-year-old, 21-year-old male into their homes is quite few. but in retrospect, I was kind of like, yeah, you know what? If I was like also a young parent, who are these kind of people I'd be looking for? So that was kind of my pinpoint. But anyways, I was looking for a family. And the app I was using is kind of like a modern dating app where you have profiles and you like try to match with the profile of the family and you like, you talk with them and you try to see what works. And I eventually was kind of not getting anything or any matches, if you will. And
Zero
I was kind of coming
matches.
to a point, zero matches, story of my life. But I
You
was
got to
like,
pay for
okay,
the
if I don't,
premium service then. Just
I know
kidding.
I was about to. I didn't have to on this one though, thankfully. I basically said if I don't find anything in the next little bit, I'm just going to have to kind of move on and either go back to school or just, keep working, whatever the case was. And I forget if I expanded my search results or whatever, but I saw a family that was based in China in a city called Shenzhen, which I thought was a spelling error for Shanghai, actually. Just shows how much I knew. And I looked at the profile and it kind of reminded me of my own family because the dad was, he's from France and the mom was Chinese and they had two young boys and I have two younger brothers. And I was kind of like, okay, I kind of even look like their kids. So if this doesn't work, then I don't know what will. And yeah, I never considered China otherwise, but I just wrote to them. They wrote me back. We called a few times and then they basically said, we would love to invite you to come stay with us if you're, if you want to try it. And I went out the next day and tried to get the visa, which was a bit of an adventure, but I ended up getting like a 2-entry 60-day apiece visa. And then I left within 3-4 weeks of that. So that all happened very fast. I didn't really think what I was getting into. But the next thing I knew, I was in Shenzhen and yeah, things took off from there.
Yeah, we have so many questions about your experience there, but just like moving yourself across the world and all the new adventures that would come with, but also like the challenges. But just to start off, like what were the first days like in China? What were the highlights? What was unexpected?
Gosh, okay. Taking me back. It was so much. It was way, I think, when I look back, especially those first few days, like even the car ride to the arrival, meeting the family, everything, it's still so vivid in my mind because of how new the experience was. I think the first thing I always think about was how when I got out of the airport, like China itself looked nothing like I had imagined. I honestly had this impression that it was going to look more akin to things that I'd seen, like images of maybe like Southeast Asia almost, where it was like really busy streets and there's like scooters everywhere. And it was kind of just like this, there's like all this chaotic energy. And I remember just getting on the highway in the car with my host father, I guess. And like Shenzhen, the city just looked like it was rolled out at the end of the night. These highways were huge and like we're just driving in the middle of like 6 lanes and there's nobody around and all the buildings were all lit up. I was kind of like, where am I? Like I had no idea what to expect. And yeah, the first day, like going out to the market, the like Tai Shichang across the street with the host mom and like getting groceries. And I remember seeing like just all the stuff you see in a market that was kind of like a sensory overload and thinking like, what have I gotten myself into? Like I really have done it this time. And I won't lie, like the first at least 4 to 5 months were pretty tough as far as navigating what that all pair relationship was going to be like. And also just underestimating things like the culture shock and the shock of living with a new family. And the first thing I'll kind of touch on was that my experience as an au pair was nothing like the traditional experience, which I am very grateful for because it allowed me to just really get a better understanding of China and form a really deep connection with the family that I was with. And what I mean by that is like I arrived and I remember we had an IE as well who like, and I was sort of like, oh, I thought I was going to be doing that kind of stuff. I had no
hey,
conception of
what are you doing here?
Taking my job. I had no conception of like how, like the modern Chinese families were
like
set
the
up.
dynamics.
The dynamics and like these things. And we were living at the time in like a kind of this compound in, if you know, Shenzhen, like Shekou, close to SeaWorld, which I spent a lot of time at SeaWorld. And shout
I
out
used to
Coco
live there
Park.
too.
Oh, you
I know that area very well.
Yeah.
There you go. So it was called Peninsula, if I'm remembering the name right. So it was a couple like compounds kind of on the water. So nice area, and a lot of families there had, IEs
Very
and
nice
whatnot.
area. I used to bike by it all the time. Like, oh, dang, you guys live here.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
you did,
that's
Travis.
That's right. That's where I lived. Yeah, for just about a year.
Not
there.
a bad place to live.
No,
for sure.
You should see where I live now. Yeah, and yeah, they just really wanted me to be as best I could, like a part of the family, and just sort of chill out and be with them and the kids. And the boys were really young. They had two boys, ages 3 and 5 when I got there. And they were awesome. Like we spent a lot of time together and yeah, basically did everything with them and the family. And I wasn't like the clock in, clock out kind of au pair, if that exists. I was just sort of I was basically a stay-at-home son to bottom line it essentially. And so I was kind of like, oh, what am I actually doing here? I thought I was going to be like, trying to help out more, but just being yourself or being myself, I guess, and being with the family and just allowing myself to relax and enjoy the experience was kind of all that was needed. And I'm grateful for that because the family themselves were so diverse. Like the boys, I remember they would speak French to dad and Mandarin to mom and then English to me. And then when they were trying to like pull a fast one on me, they would speak French to each other. That was kind of their go-to.
That's
But
cute.
little did they know, sorry, that in Canada we studied like Quebecois until like ages 14. So
So you actually,
I
yeah.
could still like kind of make out what they were doing, but they just told me never to speak French around them because my accent was terrible. So I didn't try. But yeah, the experience was great. I think it took a while to kind of settle in and just really kind of find my flow, especially at that age, and being just pretty much with the family all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was an adjustment period for sure.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's crazy. You just I mean, you take this program, you end up on the other side of the world and you get adopted by this mixed family, which in some
Yeah.
ways has some similarities with your own family, but in some ways is also very different.
Mhm.
So I remember like you mentioned how the mother had previously kind of worked through some of her own like family issues and had come into a very spiritual and Buddhist phase of her life. And you ended up
Yes.
spending a lot of time with her too, right? So I was
Yes.
wondering what that was like and like talking to
Yeah.
this person who was from a very different background,
Mhm.
very different worldview, and also plus this Buddhist dynamic. Like for a young person like you, uh, were there any drops of wisdom that she tried to
Gosh.
lay on you, or anything that changed your perspective?
Yeah, I really owe her like so much. Like I get emotional just thinking about all of our conversations. She did a lot for me in those days and took a lot of time to sort of show me the ropes of China, if you will, before I was able to kind of go off on my own. If not for her and the father of the family and especially the boys, like I wouldn't be sitting here today. So that's the first thing I'll shout out. But
Mm.
yeah, like we we would do like I would kind of just go around with her during the day, especially when the boys were in school. And I can't emphasize how close to nothing I knew about China in those days. I knew like to give context, this was probably like 20 what year would have this been? Like 2015-ish.
Mm.
So China at that point was really starting to kick it up as far as the development in a lot of areas. So things were really new as far as just the day to day. And then I'm going around with this woman, and we're going to like all these tea houses and like talking with all these spiritual people and
Hmm.
meditating and things. And I was kind of like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this going on? Like,
The role
I'm
is
I'm
evolving.
too I'm I'm too young for this. Like, yeah, it was crazy, and I just like so many things I never considered. She loved to ask me questions to just make me think and to like get me to say, I've never thought of that before, or like I've never considered that. Like I think that was just like her goal. Like how many times can I get Travis to like realize his scope of the world is really so small? Like what can I do today to help him, wake up his
Yeah.
consciousness a bit more? And one things that she would do or that we would do is after the boys would go to bed, like we would just have these long conversations like in the kitchen in like the dining room to the point where I would like have to like asked to go to bed. Like I never wanted to be like, I'm really tired today. Like, can I just go to bed? Like, I would just sort of sometimes just let her talk for like hours about
Yeah.
anything and everything from just like whether it was like philosophical thought to just like, what do you think like the meaning of life is to also just like, what do you think the meaning of you being here is and these things. And she would always like,
Yeah.
she was good at getting me to reveal things about myself without me realizing I was revealing things about myself. I don't know if that's her talent only, but
Hmm.
yeah, like I think she would just kind of get me talking like during the day when we were out, kind of doing things, whether it seemed monotonous or not. And then when we came back at home, home in the evening, then she would kind of be like, "You remember that thing you said earlier today? Well, here's what that is kind of like revealing, or like this is actually what that shows, and it kind of reflects your behavior in this way." And I was sort of like, "Oh my god!" Like I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know if I should argue back or like what I should say. So I just listened a lot, and
Yeah.
she gave me a lot of books. I tried to read everything that she gave me just to like hope I could keep up in those conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really interesting. Like I definitely look back on those days and feel like even though I was, not working typically in the
Mm.
typical fashion, or I wasn't in school, I just think overall, like the things that I learned and what I got out of that as far as just a life experience was, would have surpassed anything else I could have been doing for the year. And that's a big thanks
Yeah.
to her and the family. So yeah, I could go with like all these stories about like the interactions that we would have, or things that we would like, just things that we would come across in the day, and the things she would say. She has so many good quotes. Like she would just tell me things like, what was a good one? Like, yeah, no, there was one time I was kind of, maybe I was homesick. I was sort of like pouting around one day about like, I think I was missing out on like a friend's birthday back home, something of that nature
Mm.
that was kind of making me homesick. And she was asking me about like, my friends and like what are they all doing? And I was kind of just saying like how like everyone's sort of, like doing what a typical 21, 22-year-old does, which is you're maybe finishing up your undergrad and you're finding a job, or you're kind of doing those things, hanging out on the weekend, just carefree as you do. And she had asked me like, so what do you think about you being here then? Or like, what is, how do you feel about that? And I was like, well, it's cool, but like, I wish I was like, I wish I wasn't missing out on so many things. And we kind of went back and forth a bit. And she said, like, you're on a very different path than, the rest of the people in your life, you realize. And I was like, I guess, but I wasn't thinking about it too much like that. I was just sort of like, I'm just here. And she's like, well, you should be really grateful that you're not on the same path as like everybody else, because that means you're like, you're on your own way to discover something else. And I was
For
kind of
sure.
like, yeah, like, I was like, what are you
You're
talking about?
just
I'm just like,
you're just
I'm only
comforting me.
focused on, yeah. Or she would always tell me, like, where's your body? Where's your mind? Because she would always feel like I was kind of thinking about other things, or maybe not focused on, what I was doing. That was a little like Master Yoda like. And then I think I told you the story too, Matt, but there was one time we were walking kind of around like the water at Peninsula there. And she asked me like, if I had ever thought about working in China before.
Mm-hmm.
And I let out an audible laugh. Like that was hilarious to me. I was like, "Ah, that was a good joke. Like you made me laugh." And she's like, "Well, what's funny about that?" And honestly, I think I said something like, "No, I've never thought of that, because like in Canada, like people come from China and Asia to work in Canada, but people do
Yeah.
not go the other way. That's not a thing."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Well, I think you should consider it. You being here is a sign that there could be something for you down the line." Maybe that was foreshadowing. I don't know.
So,
I
so
just remember
wise.
my
Very
reaction. Yeah.
wise indeed. And I think, no, the point about just you're on a very different path than everyone else. I think that's something like people like us, we get a lot, or like we have to slowly come to realize, because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like we are different. And I think when you're young, especially, it's easy to focus on like what others are doing and all the distractions. But like ultimately, like you kind of eventually come to terms like, oh, this is my life. Like it is
Mhm.
an unbeaten path.
Yeah.
And your stories about your host mom also remind me of like my host mom when I like worked on this
Yeah.
farm in Hawaii. I feel like, do host people just have like that certain
Actually, they might
wisdom?
have, yeah,
Yeah,
wise
because
mama energy.
yeah,
Maybe
because I
it's
mean, if
like
they're willing
there's
to
some
let people in, like let
exactly
random strangers in, they have that like that innate curiosity about people.
an
And because I remember we would
openness.
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
all these conversations like have you ever had a spiritual awakening? Like, what is the meaning of your life? Like
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
dinner, and then I would
Gosh.
just sit there and I would just be like, wow, like I never thought of these things. Like I was also
Yeah.
21 back then, so yeah, but very cool. So before we're moving on, I also like we want to explore like you just have so many interesting experiences from this time that we were just so curious about. And I think one thing I'm particularly interested in was kind of your life outside of this like au pair situation, like outside of this family. Like, did you have time to explore China on your own or make friends
Yeah.
in Shenzhen? Like, what's that like?
Good question. So my life then was pretty simple. If I wasn't with the family, I was probably thinking about home a lot. That's honestly just where kind of my head was for the first 6 months. But like the reason I spent so much time with the host mom, especially during those early days, was she was really privy to the fact that not only was I there to help her with her kids, but she was also taking care of somebody else's kid. Right?
Mm.
And even though she'd never met my parents, or like they'd never spoken, she kind of understood how, what this meant and what the responsibility was like, kind of on, it's like a two-way street, if you will. So again, at the time, I was not thinking of it like that. I was not appreciative of it like that, but that was also the case, right? So she was like, I just want to make sure like it's important for me to know that you have an idea of how to navigate the mean streets of Shenzhen before you go off and kind of do your own thing. And like she treated me like I was her son, honestly. So I can say that. And life outside, like honestly, like a typical day would be I would get up in the morning and the IE would probably come over. She'd make breakfast, and I would kind of get the kids up, and we get ready for school. Some days easier than others, and I would help out with that. And then I'd take them to school. We'd walk through the compound, and a lot of the other families would see me with the boys. And initially, they were all quite confused, like, "Oh, when did they get like a larger son that's like just living at home?"
You
Like,
just got like drop shipped one day.
yeah, where did they get? I remember actually, this is sorry tangent, but like one time we were playing after school, and one of the other parents was asking my host mom, like, "Where did you get him, and how much did he cost like a month?" And she's like he just lives with us. Like we don't pay him. He just lives with us. He just here. And they're like, "That sounds awesome. Like he's free. Like where do I get one? But how much does he eat? Does he eat a lot?" Like she's like, "Yeah, he
Does
eats a
it eat
lot.
a lot?
Yeah, you have to give him his own room and stuff." Like, oh, that seems like kind of a lot. Then never mind.
Oh, that's a
But that's
hassle.
cool. That's cool. Let me know if you find another one. So yeah, I'd take the boys, drop them off, maybe go to the gym or the pool in the complex, and then I would have some time to like kind of explore the city, which I love to do. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would go to Tai Chi. So I was actually pretty good in those days in Tai Chi with all of my fellow seniors twice a week. That was a lot of fun. Because I was offered the chance to do that or like learn Mandarin. I said no to Mandarin. I was like,
Uh,
that seems kind of hard. So I'll pass on that. And outside though, like meeting people, like social network, that was pretty much like non-existent. I think the thing with China, especially now, is like people or my age at that time. So let's say whether it's your early 20s to like 24, they're not exactly like staying at home with their parents, right? They're pretty you're probably very busy, a very busy
mhm.
time of your life, whether that's in like university or like trying to get into school or start
Yeah,
your own
working a
business or
job
whatever the
maybe.
case
Yeah.
is. Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of people where I lived in and around like peninsula, I guess. So I would just kind of go off and like do my own thing a lot, which was good because I think prior to that experience, I was really someone who I love to just be around people. I still do, but I was definitely way more comfortable in those situations, and I felt like I always kind of needed that. And that experience kind of really taught me to just sort of slow it down and just be with myself a lot more. And that
Mhm.
opened me up to a lot of things like solo traveling in the future, and eventually moving back on my own. But it all kind of
Yeah.
started there with just those days I would just, if I wasn't doing anything, walking literally around like Lohu or like
Oh, that's very
what's
far
that?
away.
Yeah, I would take the train all the way there, just like slowly walk back kind of through the city, just kind of being like, how did I end up in this situation? What
Yeah.
does it all mean? So that was kind of my life there. And I learned as much as I could, I guess, about Chinese modern culture and society. But it wasn't until like Chinese New Year that things really changed when I went away with a different family for the New Year. Around Chinese New Year that year was when things kind of changed. Up until that point, I was always kind of still in this place of like, yeah, mind is back home, body is physically here. I'm kind of struggling with this whole transition with the new family, new culture, everything like that. It was pretty challenging. And Chinese New Year coming around, and obviously I knew that's a big deal in China. Didn't really know what it was going to be like, but I was excited for it. And my family, host family, they were going back to France to visit the father's family and do some skiing. And with my visa, just as it was, it didn't make sense for me to like leave and use an exit at that time. So I stayed in Shenzhen. And then there were family friends of ours that I was pretty familiar with, and they offered to take me with them to, I guess, the mom's hometown outside of Chengdu, so Sichuan, for the New Year. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Let's do it. Happy to go.
Yeah.
And so what ended up transpiring was a really incredible experience that is probably one of my favorites in China to date still. And I went with this family who I knew, but not all too well. Like only the father of the family could really speak some English. So I
Mhm.
was a little bit nervous about that because again, I didn't speak any Mandarin at the time, and they were still offering to take me. So I was really happy. And I remember before I left, or before my host family left, the mom and I were sitting down, and she drew out like a map of a dinner table, and she's like, "Okay, Travis, point to the seat at the table you think is like the most important seat." So I pointed to like, the head of the table kind of thing, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna add." And she added like a room kind of around it, so there was just like a door in the other side. He's like, "You think that's seat?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean that's like head of the table. I feel like that's pretty standard." And she's like, "Okay, that's the seat you're gonna want to take if you're planning to like try to pay for the meal because it's closest to the door on the side. So like, don't sit there." I was like, "Wait, what?" And then she's like, "There's two seats kind of in the middle that are sort of facing everybody that could see the door. And she's like, these are the two most like important seats. This is probably where like the grandparents are going to sit. If they offer you the seat on the left, or I forget what it was, but like the side of the grandfather, like please do not sit there. Like that is not like, don't take that seat. That's like for, guests only. Like you should just be really, humble about it. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, try to like, remember these things. And she took me to like buy some gifts so I could bring that to the family to, present well. And what else did she say? She's like, oh yeah, if they offer you red packets or like the hongbao, I guess, like you please refuse them. Like don't just take it kind of thing. And I was like, okay, that's good. And there was a few other things that we went over as far as like, Chinese New Year etiquette. And I remember when I arrived at the grandparents' apartment. So we're in this like small city outside of Chengdu. Oh, it's still a big city by Canadian standards, but just a smaller remote city. And we get up into the house, and the first thing I remember seeing was like the table was like a circle. And I was like, oh shoot, like we didn't do the circle one, we just did the rectangular table. And I just remember like the grandmother was preparing like a huge kind of like hot pot display for the first
Oh,
dinner with all the family
okay.
coming back. We are in Sichuan after all.
Yeah.
And yeah, she offered me like a honba, I think, and I said no, and then I never got it back, so I missed out on that one. But it was all good. And then yeah, when the dinner time came around, there was more family that came over, and everyone, of course, is really surprised to like see me there. They're kind of like, "Who's this?"
Right.
And the nice thing was there was other siblings in the family, and they also had there was two other kids that were about my age that had come back for like the school holiday, and they could speak some English, so they were really happy to like have a non-Chinese person joining their family for the holidays. And that experience was really special. I remember that first night we're having hot pot, and they were obviously trying to like get me to eat spicy food to see if I could handle it. And I'd never had like the mala spice before. And I remember my
Yeah.
face was going all numb, and I actually thought I was having like an allergic reaction. So I didn't know
Right.
what was happening. And then the grandfather of the family was, like curious to have some baijiu with him. And I'd never had that either. So then my face is getting numb, and it's hot, and I'm
And
sweating, and
red.
I was like, "Where's that hongbao again?" There was just a lot, and it was more than anything. It just sort of really brought me back, or reminded me of like, no, I shouldn't even say that. It just really showed me that like at the core of like this whole thing, like how important family is to just the Chinese people, and like even in a situation like this where I am a complete outsider with no way of communicating. These people are still so welcoming and open to having me just join them for the most important time of the year, essentially.
Yeah.
So that was something I thought was like, wow, this is really special. Like, could I imagine my own family doing that back home? Like that would probably
Mm.
be something. But for them, it was obviously interesting and special for them, but it just felt like it wasn't any big deal really. And
Right.
during that
Yeah.
week we would go to like the countryside, the village, and I got to see a completely different side of China than I had been in Shenzhen, which was obviously way more connected to these kind of root values and things, which was really special. And coming home from that experience, or coming back to Shenzhen, was when I kind of was like, okay, you know what, I think this is actually a really special experience, and I want to try to just enjoy it more and be fully present, and just yeah, just to
Hmm.
like just be here and just go for it and enjoy it more, because I don't know if I'm ever gonna get the chance to come back or do these things again.
Yeah.
It all started there with that Chinese New Year experience, which was really special.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. So that was kind of another turning point then in terms of your mentality and approach towards what you're doing in China and what kind of attitude you want to have while you're there,
Yeah,
right?
I think so, yeah.
And so after that, I think I remember you telling me that you stayed for a while, but then eventually you got a little homesick and then you had to go back, right?
I did.
So what was that like and what came
Well,
after?
to wrap up, I guess that time in Shenzhen, I've gone on about it for a while, but it was honestly just a year, right? And coming into it, I did not know how long I was planning to stay with the family. I think we had agreed, or I had told them I'll stay for like the first visa, and ended up extending it a few times and staying for close to a year. And yeah, after Chinese New Year, I just remember like the whole experience felt different. I was just like, I think I was honestly just way more happy. I don't know if that sounds kind of corny
Hmm.
or not, but I was just like way more into it and enjoyed things. And, I think my relationships probably with the boys was getting a lot better.
Mm. Hmm.
That took some time to like settle in and get familiar. And at that point in time, we were starting to get really close, and we had a really good bond on. And like, I just loved spending time with them and watching them kind of grow. And yeah, they were so smart. I was like every day with them was really something. They were, especially the older boy, was always teaching me something, and he was just way smarter than I think a 5-year-old should be. And then the younger one was just like, he kind of reminded me of my own brothers back home, where we were always, playing, and he wanted me to like show him things, or we were always doing something.
Hmm.
He was always making me carry him as well, which was not good for my back, but besides
You're
the
young.
point. I was young at the time, yeah. Not anymore, but yeah, eventually so the year goes on, and it was great. And we were actually on kind of like a family trip in Yunnan and Lijiang for a few weeks there. And that was kind of when I started to just think about like, okay, this time is probably coming to an end, and like I should probably start getting back home. I think at that point I was starting to kind of get a little bit homesick, and had to have like a chat with the family about like the time frame. And we were kind of going back and forth because I think they were hoping I would stay a little bit longer just to kind of enjoy more of the summer. And looking back, do I wish I had stayed? Like, yeah, hindsight's always going to be like that, but I don't know. I think I was ready to kind of conclude things and come home, at least, is what I felt like I really wanted to do. Probably knowing full well that as soon as I did that, I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like,
Yeah.
it's just going to be
Yeah.
like one of those. And so that year was great. It wound down slowly, and I remember those last couple of weeks, especially, really clear. Like, it was obviously really hot and humid in Shenzhen, so that sticks out.
Oh
But
yeah.
just just enjoying those days, because knowing I probably wasn't ever going to live a life like that ever again. And so that was really special, and I'll always remember those days. And before I came back to Canada, was I traveled to Shenzhen, or not Shenzhen, sorry, Shanghai and Beijing as well, just to see these places that I associated with China. I felt like I
Yeah.
couldn't spend a year in China and not like go to the Great Wall and stuff. So
Mhm.
I did a little bit of
Yeah.
sightseeing and touristing, Dakar, if you will, and then
Yeah.
made the way back home. And honestly, like right after I got home and saw my family and everything was good, I honestly, all I could think about was like, I think I want to go back. Like, that was like a thought that came up in my mind really strong and really fast.
Yeah. So then you did go back. So
Mhm.
yeah, how long did you have in Canada before going back? And tell us more about that like language program you did at Tsinghua. Like,
Yeah. So that came up. Yeah. I was probably home for like maybe like 8, 9 months. It was just kind of the next school year, if you will, from when I got back. But that was on my mind right away, was like, okay, how can I kind of go back to China? And what I felt like was, I felt that there was more that I wanted to kind of see and do. And obviously language was a big thing. I kid you not, I learned like close to nothing in a year, which I think is impressive. You have to try to not learn, man, when you're especially in an environment like I was, where actually people are speaking it around you, and especially the boys with their mom, like they're speaking at a 5 and 3-year-old level. That's not anything too crazy, but when you know nothing, it's hard. So that was something that was on my mind. And actually, when I was in Beijing, I met a few people in my hostel that had just finished their year study of Mandarin as well, and they were telling me about it. And I was like, hey, that seems really cool. That's like something maybe I would be interested in. So when I got back to Canada, I kind of thought about it. I didn't get into it right away, but kind of midway through the year, I started thinking about it and did some research. And in those days, at least, there was like a lot of scholarships and whatnot available to
Yeah.
international students or foreign peoples looking to study in China. So I researched that, applied for a few. I got one. And then I remember contacting the host family saying like, hey, like I'm gonna go back in September, and I'm gonna go to like, where was it? It was in Shenyang, like Liaoning Dasha or something. I think it was like where I was assigned with this one scholarship. And then the mom was like, no, you're not going there. Like, you have to come to Beijing, and you're gonna go to one of these like 3 schools. That's like
Yeah.
the only option. And I was so like, wait, what?
Truly a Chinese mom. She's truly
Yeah.
Chinese mothering you.
She's
yeah,
like,
very
Yeah.
much.
she was
You
like, you
have to
gotta
go to
go to either
Tsinghua.
Beida or Tsinghua. And she like, just look into those programs. And I was like, okay. So I decided on Tsinghua. Thankfully, I was able to kind of move a few things over. And the only reason I was able to go there was because I could figure out the website. I remember the Beida website was like so confusing. I just gave up. What could have been? Anyways, I got that sorted. And yeah, I remember being like, telling my friends and even my family like that I wanted to do this. I wanted to go back to China, and my goal was going to be to like study Mandarin. And like friends, they're probably were saying like, didn't you just get back from there? Like, wasn't that experience like really difficult? Like every time we called you, you were talking about how like tough and like how much you hated it. And like, I want to go back. And I was like, yeah, I think I do. Like, I think I want to go back and try something else. Like, I think it's, I didn't know how to explain it, but like, I feel like China's going to be big. I don't know what to tell you. And then
Yeah.
I remember telling like I don't know if it was my mom or my grandparents, but I wanted on my Japanese side that I was going to go back and do this. And someone saying like, why don't you just like learn Japanese? Like, wouldn't that make like sense?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
on paper, yeah, that would. But I felt like learning Mandarin was something that would, yeah, it was just something I really wanted to do. I don't know how else to really describe it than that. So I get back in September of 2020 or 2016, sorry, to Beijing a bit before the school year. And in the time I was away, actually, the family that I was with in Shenzhen, they moved to Beijing for the dad's work. So
Mm.
wouldn't you know it? Like we're gearing up for season 2, so it was great because he picked me up. The host father picked me up from the airport, and I remember the boys knew I was coming back, but I kind of surprised them. They're at a friend's birthday party, I think, and I
Yeah.
remember showing up, and I kind of snuck up behind the younger one and like tapped him on the shoulder, and he like turned around and saw me and was like kind of like startled, and then he just like snapped back into where we were when we left. He's like, "No, Travis, like come here!" Like, "No, no, 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 no." We just kind of like jumped back into the playing and stuff, and I stayed with them for the first little bit until move-in day at the school at the university there. And actually, I think a day or two before registration or check-in, we went to the campus just to kind of check it out. I was with all of them, and I ran into someone who would eventually be a good friend of mine that year, and a classmate. And if you do the thing, you add each other's WeChat, and he sent me a text or a WeChat message after being like, "Hey, like it's super nice to meet you, and your family seems really nice too. Like, hopefully we can like see each other during the school year, hang out more." And I was like, "Same. That's actually not my family, but like so it's all good. Don't worry about it." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I thought it was weird how like you were way older than your brothers and stuff." So that whole thing kind of continued, but yeah, that led into the year at Tsinghua there, which was all like a language study. So if anyone's ever done that, it can be pretty intensive. But the program at Tsinghua I thought was really well designed, and you can learn a lot in a year. Not going to get anywhere to like fluency, but you can do a lot with the right like mindset, habits, and things. And no, that was a great year. I met so many awesome people, lifelong friends, and I think at that point was when it really started to kind of expand my view and made me think about things like, hey, maybe there actually could be something here in
Hmm.
in China in the future, and that maybe my host mom, when she asked me if I would ever consider working in China, and I laughed out loud, maybe
Yeah.
she was onto something. So
Yeah.
that was a really cool year.
For sure. I'm
Yeah, I
sure you probably met a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds in Wudalco, like after
partied in
class.
Soundly Twin, I bet.
No way, man. I don't know where those places are. I was a good student.
Okay. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Gosh, yes, Wudalco, Sanlitun. God, what can I can't say anything about those places that hasn't been said, but I'll talk first a little bit about what studying was like because I think there's a couple of cool things I want to mention. But so I started that year in like the beginner like true TE level for just Mandarin, and I remember walking into my class the first day, just seeing all of the classmates and kind of just like it's like first day of school all over. It literally was first day of school, but you see everybody, and I was like, wow, this is like such a diverse cast and crew of characters. Like, how is this gonna go? Who's are these people gonna learn at all? Are we all like, are they better than me? I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is also when I got the name Haima, actually. It was when we registered on the first day. And they asked everyone to like pick a Chinese name. Most people will pick something kind of phonetic. So if your name's like David, you're gonna get like Dawei or something like that.
Right.
And then it came to me, and my Chinese or my Japanese name, sorry, actually would translate into Mandarin, but the pronunciation is a little bit weird. So I opted to not go for that. And I just was like thinking of something. And Travis doesn't even have like a very phonetically nice sounding Chinese
Yeah.
version. Actually, people now call me like "Cui Wei," but in those days I didn't know about that. So I actually thought of a kid from Shenzhen that was friends with the boys that we would play with. He was a really cute kid with this mohawk, and he was always smiling. And I think he was like a year or two younger than everybody because he was just like really just a like tiny tiny kid. But he was always around, and he would always yell at me in Chinese. I never knew what he was saying, but the other kids would call him Haima, or at least what I thought was Haima. I had no idea. That's just what I was hearing. And at registration, he, for whatever reason, like popped back into my head. And I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, that kid was always really happy and very cute. And I think for this year, I too would like to be very happy and very cute. So I'm just going to go with that. So I said, "Hi, Ma." And then the teacher just like, she starts laughing and writes it out. And she shows me the characters. She's like, "This one, you want this name?" And I was like, we haven't had a class yet. I don't know what that says. And she's like, water horse. It's like an animal." And she's just laughing. And uncontrollably. And I was like, sure, like, let's go for it. So then she stamps it on my card. It's my name. And then, yeah, first day of class, the teacher's doing like roll call and she gets to my name and starts laughing again. This other teacher. He's like, I'm Shay. Like, who is it? Funny you idiots. So that was me. And I found early on, actually, like the year in Shenzhen was really helpful to studying because even though I wasn't actively learning, I spent so much time just listening to the boys talk to their mom and speak. And you kind of just understand the patterns. Because a lot of students in those days, like they don't even, like if you're coming from countries without like a very like prominent Chinese population, like a lot of them didn't even know what Mandarin sounded like, or they had no idea
Yeah.
like how it was going to
Like
flow. And,
no reference
this,
point.
yeah, it's just, it's all new. But I found like that exposure and just listening over and over again was like, you understand the things that honestly make a big difference in the beginning. Like, why people say like, oh, and not like, may yeah all the time. And like, cause sometimes a lot of foreign students, you just kind of get hung up on like the minutia, like you're trying to translate everything word for word in your head. So that experience helped me kind of get into it and get going a little bit faster. And then
Hmm.
also I'm someone who's very extrinsically motivated and competitive. So I also wanted to like show I was like probably the fastest learner in
Best
my
in the
class.
class.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I was like, hey, if I want to go to Wadako tonight, I got to get my homework done and learn all these characters by 7 p.m. No. So no, it was a great time. Yeah.
Wow. No, that's I'm sure it was. And I imagine like that's also when you got to really kind of explore China like outside the realm of this like family sphere that you were accustomed to,
Yes.
right?
Yes. I felt like I got to see a really different side of China kind of through, my own kind of things I wanted to learn about and see and with my classmates. And I was lucky I had a good group of friends and we would travel around together quite a bit. And granted, the host family was in Beijing, so they would come and kind of see me and we would hang out sometimes on the
Hmm.
weekends, which was really, really nice. And I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, it was just different. Like the student life in China in those days was like very low commitment, low responsibility. So we had a lot of time to travel and to go around and see things. And I definitely wanted to make the most of that opportunity. So that year we did travel a lot and kind of got to explore different parts of the country, places I didn't know existed. It's a great way to learn language, honestly, because then when you find yourself in a situation, you'll be surprised like what you've retained or where you're able to pull these words out of.
Yeah.
So that was really special. And yeah, I say just the people you meet, like especially the classmates that I had, like I was really inspired by a lot of them, and a lot of them are still good friends as to like why they were in China, why they wanted to learn Mandarin. Like I was there
Right.
because I thought it was cool and I wanted to learn based on that experience I had. And my classmates or deskmates are like they're really keen on one day working in government policy or like working on like China and their country's relations and and they have these
Hmm.
really big audacious goals. And I was like, damn, that's really cool. Like I hope I can go home and like tell some jokes in Mandarin and like I'll be okay with that. So those are the people that you kind of get surrounded by at a place
Yeah.
like Tsinghua for the most part. So that really was special. And yeah, I got to learn a lot about other places, see a lot more of China, kind of see it in my own way as well. And yeah, I think that's kind of when I started to think a bit further down the line of like, hey, what would it be like to take another step here, and what would that
Hmm.
look like? That was kind of when I started to have that thought, talking to classmates, but not really knowing full well what it would look like for me. Honestly, that was always something I was kind of like, well, I don't want to teach English, but
Yeah.
like, do I have options? I didn't know in those
Hmm.
days. It was still too early.
Right. So also, Travis, after the language program, you didn't end up searching for another opportunity to just stay in China. You actually made the decision to go back to Canada. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what prompted you to go back, and then what kinds of things you were searching to do, what kinds of opportunities, and what happened after that?
Yeah. So that year, it went by so fast. It was honestly a great time, and I'm glad I got to do it the way I did. And I'm glad that my host mom pushed me to go to the school that I ended up going to because it would come back later to help me. Again, another thing I didn't expect her to be right about, but there you go. So the year winds down, and then you kind of come back to reality. And that for me, that was heading back to Canada, and I didn't really have like at that point in life, I was kind of going like year to year, this is the next thing. This is what I want to do. And I really wasn't thinking long term for much of that time. I was really just focused on like what I was doing, and that was learning Mandarin. And then for that year, I was really motivated. And I think I made a lot of progress. Like, I don't want to compare it to my classmates, but I was able to retain and learn a decent amount in that year, all while seeing the country and, having fun. So the time comes to go back, and I was again, like, I was happy to go back to Canada. I was a little bit homesick, but I didn't really have a next step. So I get home and I'm kind of thinking about what I want to do. And actually, I spent some time on jury duty, which was a crazy tangent, but I knew that law enforcement wasn't for me. So that was out of the way. And then essentially what I ended up getting into was I ended up getting just a job at Lululemon, which was probably one of my favorite brands growing up or just through high school, being that it's a Canadian brand from Vancouver as well. And I'd always kind of been aware of them and thought that they represented kind of the lifestyle in Vancouver at the time, especially when I was growing up. So I started just working at a new store that had opened when I was away. And gosh, it was kind of just right place, right time for me with what was kind of going on in my life and with that team that I joined. And I just really enjoyed the atmosphere and working with this team in a retail job that I'd never done that before. It was all completely new. And I thought I was just doing it for maybe like the holiday time. And one thing that I was really clear right away was that if you could speak Mandarin in Vancouver in those settings, it was really valuable because we had
A premium,
so many people, well, that would just speak Mandarin. When I was away, I guess, like, I kind of had been unaware of like how like big the Chinese population had been growing, or like that community had been developing in Vancouver. So I was kind of like, that was kind of very apparent right away. And I was sort of like, oh, this is like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I didn't really consider that, but I was glad I was using my language that I learned, albeit in that capacity. So that really helped me continue to learn and to develop it and maintain it more than anything. And yeah, so I started working there, like at Lululemon, right when I got home, and I was just enjoying it. I wasn't thinking much. And then what ended up happening was that year in like January, I guess, right after holidays, was the first time I remember the brand ever did like an activation for like Lunar New Year. And I remember like the store I was working at, we had like an event for that. And I was talking to somebody there. I was there obviously to help out and translate and things. And I was talking to somebody and they were asking me all these like questions about my experience and things. And I was sort of like, this person is kind of nosy, and usually people like don't ask these kind of questions. We don't like get into these kind of conversations like on like the sales floor. And I was sort of like, this is interesting. And eventually this person, she revealed that she also worked for the company. And I was like, oh, that makes more sense. Like, you're just curious to get to know. And then she said that she worked for, or she was just new with the brand, but was the director for China. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I was just there, as I probably mentioned in our
Nonchalant.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's cool. Like, welcome to Vancouver. And what ended up happening was she had some time and was like, hey, if you have free, like, I'd love to chat and hear more about your experience. And I was like, okay, like, sure, if that works. Like, I just started with the company. I was probably like 3 months in, is as like just regular store personnel. And I take her up on it. And I remember going to meet with her and just kind of introducing myself a bit more. Like, not that there was much to talk about, honestly, in those days. I was just a pretty regular guy. And she went on to kind of outline kind of her vision for this brand in China. And I just remember thinking, like, this is way above my pay grade. Why are you telling me these things? Like, I don't know where this is going. Like, what do you, like, is there, like, what do you want from me? Like,
What do you
what
want
can I
from
do? I
me?
don't even,
Can I?
yeah, I was like, I don't even know what I can do. And then essentially the whole point of the meeting was she was like, she gave me some advice. And it was essentially like, if I was ever really serious about coming to work or coming back to China to work, she advised me to learn everything I could about our brand, our business at the retail level in Canada and the hometown area first. And when I was ready, there would be a role for me. And whether or not she meant that, I don't know. I saw her recently the other month at a town hall, and I shared the story with her. And she's like, I don't remember saying that. So I guess not. But anyways, so the point being, that was something that kind of stuck with me. And I was like, hey, you know what? I think there's something here. There's something like here in this company I've just started with, and there's something that I could do to kind of connect these dots with my time in
Yeah.
China. And even before I left Beijing, I do remember one day going after class with my classmate to Sanlitun, and I saw like the Beijing Sanlitun, like the first store that Lululemon had opened there. And I remember seeing
Yeah.
that being like, wow, that's crazy. That's my
It's
favorite
huge.
like hometown brand in China. Like, I never would have thought those two could have been a thing, just knowing what I knew about China in those days and knowing, or how I kind of knew the brand of Lululemon to be. But I was like, that's cool. Like I was kind of proud, honestly. I was like, this is crazy. And that was also maybe some foreshadowing. But anyway, back home and after that chance meeting with the director, I just kind of stuck to her advice and I was like, hey, like I've been jumping around a lot like the last couple of years. And like if I like honestly and objectively evaluate kind of my own situation and like my own options, like if I want to go back and work in China someday, like this actually might be the best way for me to do it. Because I was really ruling out English teacher. I didn't want to go back and do that. I just knew.
Right.
And I was like, if I can just learn and continue to develop here and I have an eye on what's going on in China with this brand, I think that I just believed that. I was like, hey, maybe there's a way I can make it work. So that's just what I did. And I just went to work every day with the intention of learning and just being myself and being a good team member. When I became like a lead, like just being a good leader, learning everything I could about, people leadership, development, these things that the brand was really big on and helped me out a lot. And, that was all the way through COVID times to post COVID. And, there was a lot of ups and downs in there, but every time I kind of got myself to a point or I was at a point of like, maybe this isn't for me. And like, I needed like a change of pace or something. I kind of just remembered what she said.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just couldn't walk away until I knew that I'd done everything I could in my own power to explore that opportunity, whether or not she meant it or not. And I was like, I just need to like make sure I do that before I do anything else. So that was something I kind of always came back to. And lo and behold, it was 2023 September. And I hadn't heard from her in a while. Typically, whenever she'd come back to Vancouver, we would kind of catch up and meet, or she would come to whatever store I was at and we would just chat a bit. And she sent me a message on WeChat and like was like, hey, like it's the first time past or post pandemic that I'm back in Vancouver. Are you free to catch up? And I was like, oh, like this is a nice surprise. Like I hadn't thought about China or anything like that for a while. I was actually just like actually thinking I was like I might be in the need for like an actual change of pace or like a change of job at that time, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, hey, if you're free, like let's catch up. I'd love to hear how you're doing. And I was like, great, like what works for you? And then I think she replied with like, I'm actually really busy, so I can't meet you, but my VP is in town for the first time and I think you should meet him. And I was like, okay, sure, like if that works, I'm happy to do it. So she's like, here's his WeChat, add him, and then you guys can set up a time. And so I did that and I met with this guy the next day and didn't really know what we were going to talk about, but I remember we kind of agreed on meeting for like an hour just for like a coffee. And we ended up spending kind of half the day together, just kind of around Vancouver. One thing led to the next, but early on in our conversation, we were just kind of chatting and he asked like, so Travis, like if you want to come back to China, like when can you do it? And I was like what? Like, what do you mean when? Yeah, he's like when can you reasonably like come back or make a move? And I was like, geez, like I had no idea what to say. I remember thinking like ASAP, but I just signed a new contract with a different team. And I was like, we're preparing honestly now for like holiday season in NA. That's a lot of work. So nothing before the end of that. I want to see this through. And once that's done, like I'll be open to opportunities. I think he said something like good answer.
Good answer.
He was like, where do you want to go? Like because I told him a bit about, my time in Shenzhen and obviously I was in Beijing. He's like, do you want to go back to one of those cities? And I was like, honestly, for something like this, I would love to go to Shanghai to start, knowing that's where our company is like stationed in China. And that's where you are. That's where the director is. That's where everyone I know is. I think starting there would be really good for me. And then I'd be open to, opportunities as we go. He's like, okay, that sounds good. So we kind of just chatted about, it was like all kinds of things that day. There was a few questions of like, one thing I remember he asked me was like, how do I know like you're committed essentially? Like, how do I know like
The
if we
long
bring you,
haul.
like
Yeah.
you're going to stay and like, how long can you stay? And I think I said something like I can stay for 5 years. And I didn't know how to convince him that I was like the guy to see it through. But based on the experiences that I had had with the family at the school, mostly with the family, I was like, I believe in my ability to be adaptable and, to stick it out through situations, no matter how tough the circumstances are. And I knew that my experience in China would be helpful, but at this point, it was almost coming up on like 6-7 years ago. So I know things have changed a lot, but I just knew I was willing to give it a try and I would see it through. And I talked about something about how I'd like to eat street food as well. And then he was like, okay, I have no doubts that you'll be okay in China. Like I have no doubts that you'll be okay to like live and do your
You
thing.
didn't
I'm just more
mention
curious about
the Tai Chi classes.
No, I was saving that if I needed to. I was a little
It's
rusty. So basically from there, he said, like, I'm gonna get when I'm back to Shanghai, I'll set up a meeting with you and a few other like regional managers. I want you to meet them, and we'll see what they think. So that kind of came around. It was like a 30-minute Zoom call, I think. And I didn't know what if this was like a job interview, if I was gonna have to speak in Mandarin. I didn't know what they wanted. I just knew that I needed to somehow convey that whatever they were thinking, I was the right person for this in
yeah,
30 minutes or less.
yeah,
So that happened. And then there was a few other people that I kind of met periodically at the VP's recommendation. And then all of this kind of came to in like 2023 around December. I remember I was in Hawaii and I was getting into an elevator in the hotel before I lost like Wi-Fi in the hotel room, and I looked at my phone and I got a WeChat message from the VP, and I just read the preview of it, and it was like, "Hey Travis, I just had a chat with the director and these other regional managers, so and so, so and so, and we think that the Xintiandi location in Shanghai would be a really good location for you. When you have a moment, let's talk about this." And I remember like almost dropping my phone, being like, "Oh my god, like, what is this? Is this like an offer? Like, did this actually like come to?" Like, I
yeah,
couldn't believe it. Yeah. So from that point onwards, it was really just kind of like gearing up for this opportunity now, what's brought me back to China and kind of getting that process underway. But it was a long, haul, 6 years of kind of working towards a goal that, I was never really sure had even a chance of being
yeah. That's
achievable. So it was a haul, but gosh, I'm glad I stuck with it. And it's the power of just, going one more day. And sometimes I think too, I just have a bad habit of not knowing when to give up on things. And, sometimes you end up back in China as a result.
But
that's
it's a
quite the
different
superpower.
dynamic.
Hmm.
It's a different dynamic each time. And you kind of, you're a different version of yourself each time. And we kind of keep adding upon that. So that's super exciting for you. And just, it's such a good combination of, I feel like, the things you're really passionate about. From our convos and being in China, working for Lululemon, like, and experiencing a new city all at once. And it's different to work here than to like either than like if you're here as a student for
Yeah, or
sure. Yeah,
stay at home
yeah,
son. Right.
very different dynamic.
God,
But
you hit the nail on the head with that, Susan. I remember getting the offer and like opening up that email and being like, holy smokes, like this is coming true. I've really done it this time. Like I have no idea what this is gonna be like,
I've
but I'm
really
going
done
back
it.
to I'm like, it's round three. This time it's working. I was, student life, stay-at-home son life. Each time very different, as you said. And, I changed a lot in those 6 years as well. And I just really tried to make sure I was as clear as I could be with myself that this time was going to be nothing like the other two, and that it was going to be the most challenging yet. And I remember being like, yeah, this is Travis, this is what's going to be like. You're going to be working and you have responsibilities and all these things. And nothing I could have told myself or done could have prepared myself for what the reality would have been, which was a complete like shock 180 of coming in and working in China in this capacity, which was, yeah, so challenging in the beginning. I'm still here, so I guess it's okay. But it's been an adventure to say the least. But I'm super grateful that I was able to, work to this opportunity, and I was trusted enough to give it a try. And like to give context, like it is still really uncommon for non-Chinese people to like work in these kind of capacity in this capacity in China, like
For
in
sure.
frontline like retail roles especially. Like it's not really a thing like it is in other parts of the world where like in Canada, you can go anywhere and you're probably gonna deal with somebody or meet somebody who English is not their first language. But coming to China and like interacting with somebody who is, I'll say not Chinese, because we do have a lot of people in China, like Chinese people that are different ethnic minorities that have multiple languages. That's not as uncommon. But as far as just like people from completely outside in these spaces is really not a thing. So I
Yeah.
don't think anything I could have told or done would have prepared me for what it was going to be like. But yeah, yeah, we're doing it.
You're really on your own path
wow,
now. There's no
yeah.
roadmap, no compass for
Making it up
this.
as I go here.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
that's 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 how we all do it. That's the vibe when
That's
you're in the
exciting. That's how you
the
become yourself.
江湖. But
Mm.
so
Yeah, true.
what, like, I guess, Travis, so tell us a little bit about your day-to-day life now, and what was the biggest challenge of many since
Gosh.
moving back for work?
So to give it just a bit more context, like I basically was transferred by the company to work here. So that all being said, like I moved in the capacity of the role that I was in back in Canada. So like helping manage a retail store is how I first arrived in China. So on paper, it's like, okay, you're doing the same job for the most part you were doing in Canada, but now you're just doing it in China, which
Should be easy,
that was sort of
right?
you would think, and I think sometimes I do like to overcomplicate things and get in my own head too much. So that's never never helpful. But that was kind of the thing. And yeah, arriving in Shanghai 2 years ago now, and like, oh geez, I even just remember being on that plane, being like, I had a thought. I was like, when I get off this plane, my life is going to change completely. I had no idea what it's going to look like. I just kind of was trying to get myself psyched up. And when I talk, like, what's different, I mean, every day there's something, but especially in those early days, again, what really kind of what was challenging was obviously language, I think, was a big thing that I was struggling with. I should say throughout that whole process of me kind of going through the internal meetings and stuff with the China team within Lululemon, like they never asked me to speak in Mandarin at all. They just kind of took my word. Maybe the
Wow.
director vouched for me. They never like put me on the spot and like say this, do this. But I'd been speaking a lot in Canada, but nothing could have prepared me for how it was here. I think what I underestimated was that when I'm doing that in Canada, it's like I'm on my home field advantage where the person I'm speaking to, it's nice for them because, hey, they get to communicate in their probably native language in an environment that is not typically known for that. And then when you come here, you're in like away team,
Well, yeah, that's a great way to
away
put it.
arena. And it's kind of like, why on earth would I talk to you when I could just go to anybody else and they're going to be 1,000% way more competent and comprehensive? Like, what is so special about you? So I think that was my first couple of days of like, I just jumped right into the deep end and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? So there
Mhm.
was a lot of moments of like questioning and doubting, especially just, I wasn't even like getting into my full role responsibilities. I was just trying to learn the business as it functioned. And there's so many differences, like things that like operationally speaking, that east to west, Canada to China, that are different. So I was kind of trying to keep up with all that stuff as well. And one thing also that I knew that was going to be the case, but again, I couldn't have prepared myself for it, was my team here being all Chinese. And
Mhm.
I'm the only non-Chinese person. For a lot of them, this was the first time they'd ever had a non-Chinese colleague, let alone a chance to spend time with the same non-Chinese person continuously. So there was a lot of curiosity in the beginning, or I should say, like people were kind of like, "What's this guy doing here? Like, does he know anything about our work? Does he
Yeah.
know how to speak? Can he speak Mandarin? Like, what's he supposed to do? Like,
Yeah, what's his
what is he
deal?
what can he do? Like, why is he here? Like, why is he here with us? Why isn't he at another like location?" So there was a bit of that, but nothing negative, I would say. If anything, people were really welcoming and curious, and they brought me right in right away to the team. And like I was really conscious of that, and I wanted to make sure I was open. And just like first thing I remember doing was when I got like access to my like work apps, I opened up like my team list, and I remember like writing out everybody's Chinese name in a notebook and like just trying to learn it. And then when I first got into work, I remember like that completely went out the window because people have obviously a given Chinese name. They probably have a nickname, and then they probably
Yeah,
have an English name. So there's
English
like three
name.
names for every single person. And I was like, hey, which one are you again? Like trying to match it all up. But I just remember doing things like that to try to work myself in.
Mhm.
And yeah, then like I was completely taken in by this team, and they would help me out with everything because I had been in China, but not for 6, 7 years at that point. So all these apps I was not really familiar with. Like I just remember in Beijing, like when I was there for school, WeChat Pay was kind of becoming a thing, but it wasn't like fully commercialized or like, broadly used yet. I was paying with cash mostly that year, honestly. And then obviously getting the hang of things like, WeChat's functions, Alipay. I remember the day that they found out I didn't know how to use the Hongbao on Meituan, they were all making fun of me, and that was kind of embarrassing. I was like, they're like, "Oh, 这么贵，你为什么每天收入才50块？Like, how are you doing this?" So, you kind of learn as you go, but without that, I wouldn't still be here. So I'm really grateful that I get to learn every day. I still do with that. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like being, if I had to sum it up, I'd imagine it's what it's like to be an exchange student, but like I'm a professional exchange student at this point.
Sure.
So it's just all those pieces, and I'm
The
yeah,
Hey,
it's
that's
just a wild
exactly
ride.
what you have experience in though,
hey, the
Travis. So,
stay-at-home
Yeah,
son to professional exchange student pipeline.
I
yeah.
am
That's
on one. Yeah, yeah, that's how it feels sometimes. But I mean, it goes both ways. I think I try to be as open and helpful as I can when it comes to learning things, whether it's English or kind of understanding more about the broader world, if that helps.
Hmm.
Like, I get a lot of questions from, my team about things. And, we like to have these conversations or discussions, and they're always curious about what life is like growing up in Canada, or what my experiences have been like, or how I feel even being in China. Kind of almost like to the extent that they like to see how much I can take or what I can handle as far as like how Chinese I can go for
Yeah, yeah,
certain things. So that's always a lot of fun. Yeah, but it makes the experience what it is. It's really special. And I'm glad to do it.
yeah. The exchange is a two-way street, and it seems like also your experience working in this capacity, it's also culturally socialized you to living in Shanghai more quickly,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And then, another kind of aspect of life abroad that a lot of people think about is like, how do you build community, or how do you
Mhm.
join a community that you resonate with, right? When everything else is potentially different. And
Mhm.
so I know that you work with organizing a running club organization, right?
Yeah, I help out a bit. I do some pacing. Yeah.
So how did you find that, and I guess what role has that played in terms of helping you find your own community in Shanghai?
Mhm. Thanks, Matt. I'll tee me up for this one. So what I'll summarize quickly was I've been here for 2 years, and I'm not even joking. For the first like year and a half, I did not make a single non-work friend or person outside of work, like a native English speaker. I just spent I was so busy trying to get up to speed to integrate myself as fast as I could. Like, I would talk to family friends back home, and they're like, "Oh, you must be doing well, having like you have probably so many friends." And I was like, I have not met a single person. I just haven't had time for it. And part of that too is early on, especially, I'd come home from work and my brain would just be so tired. I just couldn't
For sure.
bring myself to do. It was just so different in those days. And coming into year two, I guess at that time, I was like, I really wanted to focus on kind of building my life and things outside of work in Shanghai, knowing that I was going to be here for at least 3 years and hopefully more. So I started to look at ways to do that. And it sounds kind of silly. You're in a city of, what is it? Maybe roughly the population of Canada, yet you're struggling to meet people. And it just sort of seems kind of silly to say out loud, but that was my
Hmm.
situation, right? And yeah, I just was kind of looking and trying to find groups and interests. And one thing I have been doing consistently for the last 6, 7 years is a lot of running. It's definitely my biggest hobby and thing that kind of keeps me sane outside of work and here in China. And yeah, I've run 5 marathons since I've been in Shanghai, and I got
Holy
into the
crap.
Wow,
Shanghai Marathon
That's a
again this
lot.
year. Found out I got it.
it's a lot of miles.
Third
Dang,
time I'll be doing it, so I'm
congrats, man.
excited. I will see you there at the finish line. Yeah, so I do a lot of that, and I was just sort of searching for run clubs. I hear back in Canada and in the West they've become very popular, and I joined a few in Shanghai, but I hadn't really found anything that was really kind of for me. And then I found another one on Instagram by the name of Move Crew that looked interesting. So I met some really cool people that day on this run, just kind of connecting through something I really like and sharing a bit about my experience in China. And it was a way that I could kind of help some people in the group, whether it was with running or just, yeah, getting settled here. And then I kind of knew right away that I was like, I wanted to help out and be more involved if that was an opportunity. But I kind of was just sort of not sure how to go about that. But then lo and behold, one of the co-founders posted in our WeChat group that they were needing like pacers. And I
Hmm.
remember like I like wrote or applied for that pacer role. Like, I was applying for a job. I remember just like listing
The
out
cover
like
letter.
work experience. Yeah, like how I have like, experience with leadership and like in like the space of,
My God.
physical
Wasn't
workouts. And I've run 13 marathons in the last 6 years, and these are my time. Like, no, 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 like I know what it takes. Man,
You need to help.
we could use your help. And I was like, hey, great. I just wanted to make sure I got that. So
You're so well
yeah, but then
prepared, though. Yeah.
I kid you not, I remember sitting at my desk being like, if I
you
don't get this
literally
freaking
work
pacer
for
role,
like an athletic lifestyle brand. I mean, like they could not have
yeah,
found
but
someone more qualified.
I don't
Hmm.
want to leave anything to chance. So I basically, the two co-founders, and I think they have a few other people that support. They're like, hey, let's give this guy a chance to help out. And no, it's been really good. I really enjoyed it. I've been able to meet a lot of really cool people through this group and kind of help build my life outside of work. And that is, I think to me, that was important because, like, oh gosh, how do I say this? There's just something different about or something that I still need my own self of like having that kind of connection with people that I can kind of speak English with and kind of relate to more culturally, I
Yeah,
guess.
for sure.
Mhm.
Not that I don't love spending time with all of my Chinese friends and colleagues and just being the Chinese Haima or Chinese version of myself because it's getting there. I'm very much just localized at this point. There
Hmm.
was something I felt like I was kind of missing in my life that I wanted to just build out to make this experience more enjoyable and kind of add to it. And this running group has been a great way to do that. So I was really grateful to get the chance to support and yeah, just use all parts of my experience, whether it's running or living in China, to kind of add to that. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, for people like us, sometimes it's difficult to find a space where you can truly like be yourself and find those with like backgrounds and can relate to the set of experiences you have. So
Hmm.
I think we're all trying to find something out there, whatever works. Thanks for
Plug
sharing
the
that.
group too.
Oh,
Too.
I'm sure hopefully the founders are happy with this, but it's called Move Crew. And we run every Sunday. Right now it's 8 a.m., sometimes 9 a.m. But we were recently shouted out in, I think, Time Out Shanghai is like one of the
mm,
best or top run clubs in Shanghai. So please check us out. It's a very diverse group. Yeah, weekly runs. Oh gosh, I think like we're averaging like close to like 100 people each week as well. So there's
Yeah,
just
that's
a
crazy.
crazy amount of turnout. It just sort of shows like there's a need for this kind of thing, this kind of community in Shanghai as well. And it's really welcoming. I think for me, I get nervous kind of going into these situations sometimes, like, but there was no feelings like that. I remember this is a side tangent, but when I went to go to the Canadian Chambers of Commerce Canada Day event once when I was here, I thought I was going to meet some friends there. That was not it. That was not my scene. As much as I wanted it to be, that was not for me. So I'm glad that this community exists and I've been able to, yeah, just make some great friends to share living in China with, all while adding to my life here.
yeah, no, for sure. Need to make it out to one of those next time I'm in Shanghai. It's on
Yeah,
my
come through, come
list.
through.
Yeah. All right. So, I guess just to wrap up on
Mhm.
your life journey here,
No
what
worries.
we're gonna move on to kind of like the advice section of this podcast. Like basically, we have guests share some takeaways from just their very unique lives, the path that they chose to pursue,
Mhm,
and how for like a younger crowd out there navigating a similar journey or considering navigating, what would be
mhm.
your words of wisdom?
Oh, geez. I always feel like I don't know if I give good advice or not. I always feel like my advice is terrible.
Oh, no
But,
worries.
if I had anything to say or anything to share based on what I've, been through, what I've learned, there are a few things, I guess. What comes to mind first is definitely being open mind. That's how I ended up here in the first place. Obviously, growing up Japanese Canadian, like I said, China was never on my radar. So you could say being here is a bit of young fan, but also just a bit of being open and just taking the opportunities when they come. So I definitely say that. And then like just not taking yourself too seriously if possible. I think when I say that, that means I do take myself very seriously, but I need to, kind of remind myself to just chill out and laugh. And I think when you're, not feeling the need to be perfect, not taking yourself too seriously, that's when you can really enter a state of learning. And definitely even in my work here, being with my team and being like, the odd one out all the time, that's always going to be very prevalent and reminded. But, there's no moments better than when I'm talking to, a guest, a customer, and they're not sure if I'm Chinese or not. A lot of people think like "你是 Xinjiang ma," like they don't really know, but they're kind of like his accent's
I can
kind of
see it.
strong,
Yeah.
but he's talking. Yeah, I just get by. But like that when I'm just having fun, not worrying too much, that's when you see the biggest growth, and that's when I really enjoy what I'm doing, and it's why I remind myself it's why I'm here in the first place. So as best you can, feel free to laugh at yourself whenever you can. I think that's the best way to just kind of keep things in perspective. And then maybe a hot take, but just the ability to persevere and stick with something and see things through, I think it's harder nowadays with the amount of opportunities and things available to
Yeah.
us and, you
Distractions, I
know,
think.
distractions, whatever it is. And, when I tell people that I've worked at Lululemon now for almost 9 years, the reaction I get is like, holy smoke, like what? What? Like people are so surprised because you just don't see,
Yeah.
our generation staying at the same job for maybe 3, even 5 years. It's not as common, and, maybe that's a bit of me not knowing when to give up, and granted, I probably had some thoughts of sunk cost fallacy in my head, but I think the
Hmm.
ability to stick with something, to, pursue your goals no matter how unclear or uncertain it might seem. There's still a lot of value in that. And I think you can gain a lot personally. And, I'll tie it into running a little bit with training for marathons and stuff. It's always about the process, and each day is building towards something bigger, and kind of knowing that. And maybe, yeah, even when it's not clear, just know, like, everything you're doing today is leading into that. And the ability to stick with something through the hard times and the good times is still very valuable, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for those points, man. And something that I really respect and appreciate about you and your story is just like, it's such a great example of how you can just work towards something and stay prepared even while you're not really sure of what's to come. So you can hold that uncertainty while also persevering and doing the work that's needed. And then
Mhm.
in your life, it seems like that preparedness plus a bit of chance, a bit of luck actually created the exact outcome, the best outcome for you. And
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
pretty amazing to hear. Yeah. So I hope people can also learn a little bit about this approach, because I guess it is fundamentally kind of difficult, I guess, to hold these things at the same time that seem contradictory, but also to have your eyes on the prize in a way.
Yeah, well said, Matt. I think, well, I cannot stress enough that I'm just such like a like a regular person. Like, when I tell people about how I've ended up here, it's just like anybody could do what I do. Be honest with you, it's nothing outrageous. Like, you've summed it up really well. Like, right place, right time. I definitely had a lot of luck and preparedness. I think that's something too that I really value, is just sort of being ready to take the chance and to be ready for these opportunities when they do come up, because they will present themselves, and it's going to be on you to make that decision and decide for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool, man. So the last thing that we usually like to do is we'd like our guests to pick a category for recommendations, and then Susan and I will try our best to also come up with something on the fly.
I had a few in mind, so I don't know. I want to make sure we can all contribute to these ones equally, because, like I mentioned, running is a big part of my life here. So I wanted to know, like, for you folks, if you had to pick a spot in Shanghai, whether it's for a run or a bike ride, or maybe even a city walk, where would you recommend? Uh,
You can go first.
oh, do I go first? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, sorry. If you follow me on Strava, you will see I continuously run around Shanghai Stadium, just because it's close to where I live, and it's like an easy loop. The thing with big cities is it's not always easy to, like, get a flow and, like, find something yet, or find a place that you can kind of run uninterrupted. But if I had to pick one place in Shanghai to go for a run, that, gosh, it's hard to not pick the fun, because it is so iconic and so beautiful. And when you are running there, you're kind of just like, how is this not real life? How am I doing? So that's really cool. But one place I went to not too long ago that was really interesting for running was, it's called Di Shuihu, which is just like in the south,
Mm,
I guess, west of Shanghai. If you see it on the map, it's that perfect circle.
yeah.
And
I've
it's
seen it
it's
on
the
the map.
man-made lake.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I went there for the planetarium, but also because I wanted to run around the lake. So
Yeah.
just side questing. And it's a perfect 11 kilometers on the middle ring, which is so satisfying, because it's just like yeah, it's a perfect circle. So
Hmm.
definitely, if you're in Shanghai, if you're into the Strava map and you don't mind going on a bit of an adventure, I would definitely recommend it. And it's also a really good place to watch a sunrise.
It's great. Yeah. I'll definitely check it out next time. It's a little bit far from the city center, but
It's pretty far,
seems
yeah.
like well worth the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Susan, any picks?
I'm not in Shanghai for long enough to like discover these routes. I feel like I barely exercise when I'm in Shanghai, because I'm traveling. But
Maybe you
I
can pick a place, or in Boston or anywhere you've lived,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess.
well, Boston, of course, Charles River Esplanade, like prime running routes. Yeah, I do run a lot here. I don't do marathons though, but I do some halves, and yeah, but it's great running routes. Shanghai, I will second you on the bun, just because I'm basic, but it's also just very nice routes for
Hmm.
biking as well. And
You can't go wrong.
yeah, no, if you're here, definitely check out the Charles River Esplanade. Maybe you'll be here for like a Boston Marathon or something. Like, I don't know, since you do that kind of thing.
Work if I can hang on for another 5-6 years, I might get in there. So working on it.
Cool. Good luck. All right, Matt.
Yeah, so as you guys might know, my feet are completely flat, like bricks or planks of wood, to the point where no country would probably want to draft me in the event of World War III. So I don't do much running, like for the sake of running, but I do a bit of cycling. And one of my favorite places to cycle is basically the trail that is to the east of the Huangpu River. So on that leftmost edge of Pudong. And you can start in Qiantan Gongyuan, Qiantan Park, somewhere in the south. And then you can just follow the coast basically all the way up 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers. You can bike as much as you want, but like the scenes are great. You bike through a lot of different parks. You see a lot of different landscapes. You see a lot of like different people just like, enjoying their lives in the parks. And yeah, that's like my favorite trail to go. And then afterwards, you can take the ferry and go back to Puxi if you live in Jing'an or Xuhui district. So it's very convenient as well. Yeah, so that's my pick.
I've been meaning to check that out for so long. Next trip as well.
I wanted to bring my friends who were visiting from the States to do that. That was like the main thing that I wanted to do with them. That's like not touristy, but then also kind of allows them to see Shanghai, see the sights and the vibes. But yeah,
instead y'all were hung over.
That and like these American guys, some of them just don't know how to bike or they're afraid to bike in a city.
Okay.
Not used to bikeable cities, I suppose.
Not used to like functional cities. That's the
functional cities. There you go.
Yeah. All right. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Liminal Space, where we navigate the thresholds of culture, identity, and experience. If our conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share your own story. We love to hear what you've discovered in the spaces in between. Join us next time as we continue to explore what it means to live in the liminal. See ya. Bye.
See ya. Thanks, Travis.
Bye. Thanks for having me.